I'm Dick. Thank you. Recording in progress. Uh, I'm the co-chair of SBCAN or co-president, and one of my jobs as South County co-chair is the organization convening of the monthly roundtable. If you haven't been to one before, these are occasions where we get to talk to people who are doing something, working on some issue or project or matter that is on the cutting edge or the front of attention in different parts of the community. It's a chance to go a little bit in depth into some issues and situations like we will today with this particular project. We are, as an organization, very interested in housing issues as one of our central topics, and trying to keep up and understand the dynamic on the county level with the housing element and the various projects that are in various stages of proposal is part of what we are trying to accomplish today. Our practice is that once we have the presentation going, if you have issues or questions you want to raise, put them in the chat and we will try to monitor that as we go along rather than interrupt or the flow of presentation. And eventually we may just open the floor if that's desired. But the first way to communicate is through the chat function. So one of the hats I wear in connection with SBCAN is with a coalition called the SUN Coalition, Sustainable University Now. We started more than a decade, it's really about 12 years or more, to monitor the UCSB plans to expand their student enrollment, and to mitigate that expansion's effects on the community. And eventually SUN, which is a coalition of SBCAN, the League of Women Voters, Citizens Planning Association, other environmental groups participated in the conversations we had reviewing the UCSB plans. Eventually, we negotiated a very comprehensive agreement with UCSB that was incorporated into the final long-range development plan. And that agreement dealt with many, many issues having to do with the growth of the campus, traffic and water and energy use and natural environment impacts. A lot of those things are covered in our agreement, and we were pretty proud of the outcome. And the big question was housing. And the important thing that I want to raise here is that the UCSB agreement with us, as well as with the county and the city of Goleta, promised a certain level of housing development for students and for faculty. And in our case, our agreement was even more detailed than the county or Goleta agreements with the UCSB on those matters. The big disappointment has been the inability or failure of the university to do the housing promised in the LRDP. That promise was to house the 5,000 new students that would be coming to campus would be housed on campus rather than in the community at large, and that up to 1,840 units of faculty and staff housing would be developed between 2010 and 2025. And this failure is partly due to the fact that the rate of enrollment increase was much faster than the UCSB had planned, because the legislature and the statewide system decided to accelerate that growth. So more students came more quickly than the original plan had been designed to fulfill and to house. But the other big problem, of course, was the offer by billionaire, the late Charles Munger, to build the world's largest dormitory on UCSB campus that would theoretically have housed all the students that they were planning to house. The chancellor clearly could not just walk away from that, but the result of the Munger offer, which started around 2015, the offer first became known, was to shelve all the dormitory development they had planned, put it on the side, in awaiting the development of the Munger project. And I won't go through the fact that the Munger project received a tremendous amount of global scorn, derision, mockery because of its features. The way I like to describe it, perhaps unfairly, is that a 95-year-old billionaire decided to make a dormitory for 18-year-olds to live in based on his own ideas of what they should be experiencing in that setting. And there was severe criticism by architects and by an independent review committee finally pointing out the many ways this project was not going to work for safety reasons, not just the windowless bedrooms, which was important, but all kinds of safety and health and mental health things were raised, questions about that were raised. So the delay in building any dormitories has created a serious problem in the already highly impacted South Coast region in terms of housing. And the faculty housing promise was very, very exciting to us. And that also failed to materialize at in anything like the scale that was originally planned. The first stage of the faculty housing was a project that is called Ocean Road. It was designed as a 540 apartment and not just apartments, but condo style development along Ocean Road, which is the street that separates Isla Vista from UCSB. It's a rather imaginative plan, design. UCSB decided they could not build this on their own, which they have done. All the other faculty housing has been built by the campus. But UCSB decided to seek a private partner, and they announced about 3-4 years ago they had started a partnership with something called Greystar, which is a national development and housing management firm with a lot of university college housing as part of their portfolio. So that was seeming to be the starting point of building the Ocean Road project. However, this developer backed out of the deal more than a year ago. And since that backing out, there has been no announcement of any effort or ability by the campus to go forward with Ocean Road. So the promise that UCSB would build hundreds of employee housing at below market rates that really would have helped the whole region in terms of housing, still very unfulfilled. So the settlement agreement between UCSB and the county and the city of Goleta provides for a timetable to build the dormitory facilities. They have promised to build what the remaining number of beds will be created according to the agreement by 2029 in a two-phased operation. This is not the Munger project. This is the original dormitory project based on the original dormitory projects UCSB had put into the LRDP planning. So they've wasted about 10 years in the development of these projects. That's my dismay, about one of my dismays. The but if the settlement agreement requires the first stage, which I think is about 2,100 units, to be done by 2027, and if any failure to do that would cost them, they have to pay a penalty up to $1 million if they fail to build that stage. And then the next stage, additional, I think 1,300 beds would be built by 2029. And again, there would be penalties if they don't do it. So the settlement agreement that was announced, which also includes some dollar payments by UCSB to the county and to the city for what they're describing as joint projects helpful to the community and to the university, will be, that's what the settlement agreements are. There is mention, but there's no timetable for any of the employee housing that is in the LRDP and that's been promised for all these years. So we still have no definite plan for the Ocean Road project. And that's the dismay that the Sun Coalition has with this settlement agreement. In addition, we're not only concerned with the building of the faculty staff housing, but making sure that it is actually affordable to a large part of the campus employee population. Even if it's below market, the market is so high that there are many younger faculty who might be able to use the campus housing, and certainly a lot of the staff may not be able to really find it very affordable. If you promise to build housing 10% below market, that is not adequate for meeting the needs of a lot of the faculty and staff based on existing experience. One way to do it would be to peg the pricing of housing to the actual salaries that the staff are making. And you could guarantee, for example, that everybody would be entitled to housing that costs no more than 30% of their income if they wanted to live in the campus housing that we're talking about. And that's not, so there's no, that's our grievance here, our dismay is that there's no indication of how the right level of affordability will be reached, at least no public one. So we're not sure how to proceed with getting more of a clear commitment and timetable for the faculty staff housing. And the Sun is suing the university for failure to comply with the Public Records Act. They have failed to release to us many documents that we've demanded to understand the planning process going into the dormitory and the staff housing. So that suit is being undertaken right now. We filed this in court a few weeks ago, and we're waiting to know what the timetable for that is. We think maybe this suit may be a way of getting a wedge around the remaining housing issues. I'm a 50-year member of the faculty at UCSB. I'm retired, but I've been there almost 50 years. And or more than 50, I am very dismayed with the way this has turned out, because the housing promises that were made have not been fulfilled, and they could have been. Other campuses are ahead of us in terms of building faculty housing. And so that's part of what we're trying to find out, is why UCSB was on this privatization track rather than go ahead and develop both the dorms and the faculty housing, as they have done all the other housing on the campus up to now was done through campus resources and campus staff taking charge of. And these two projects didn't happen because they were relying on private development. So is there anyone who'd like to raise any question about what I'm talking about before we jump to our main topic here? But I thought people ought to know about this, because none of this has been very well covered, you know, in the media, as far as I know. Any questions about the settlement agreement or Sun's activity around this? Well, nobody. So hopefully it's all clear, and that you will be paying attention to this issue if you're able to. Any other announcements before we introduce our presenters? Announcements on North County issues, because this is a combined roundtable. Usually we have separate roundtables for North and South, but we're unifying this today. Anyway, welcome to people who joined us since we started. Glad to see various folks here. Jonathan Abood, who's a member of the SBCAN board, I'm gonna kind of attribute to you the idea for this session. You had said that you were intrigued and supportive of what you knew about the so-called San Marcos Growers Project, and that raised questions for other active people like Linda's here. Linda Honigman from the League of Women Voters, you know, many people have questions about all these projects. So we thought it would be a great idea to hear the details of this major project as one of many that have been put on the table or in various stages of development, various levels of controversy in the wider community. And so we're very happy that the key people who are involved in this project, which is John Blair, who's a developer and longtime, I guess, planner in this community, developer in the community, and Brett Hodges, who is one of the founders of various. You're an owner of the nursery, right? A member of the ownership team. Anyway, you should introduce yourself, because I could read what I have, but I think you'll be better at doing that. And we also have representing the County Housing Authority, because they have a role in this project, which is part of what we want to learn about now. And I think part of why Jonathan was interested in the project, because of that partnership. And SBCAN is happy to have these partnerships developing. So John is here, and I think maybe Valerie, others from the Housing Authority may be able to also talk about what this project is and what it will look like and what its features are. So welcome to John Blair and Brett. Do you want to, who wants to start things off?
I can start off with a little bit of the history of the property. Brett Hodges, I'm one of our family has owned the property since the late 1970s. Oops, there we go. Get a slide.
Yeah.
There we go.
Our parents bought it's made up of two parcels, one that's 6 acres and one that's 27 acres. And my father bought the small parcel in around 1979. to start a wholesale nursery. He passed away before it opened. My mother decided to continue the nursery. And then when the property across the street became available, she decided to buy that to expand the nursery. It was zoned residential, 4.6 units per acre. So just like all the suburban areas around us, I think our property can really be seen as an interesting case study on probably poor urban planning over the past 40, 50 years. So we were zoned just like everyone else. My mother always wanted to develop. She paid a price for it that reflected its residential value. She imagined a senior housing center there back in 1980. But so then the nursery expanded. In the 1990s, there was a move in the county to downzone residential properties that had not yet been built up. Our neighbor, Sungate, had already been built. It was zoned just like us. We hadn't built. So they looked at us and they said, oh no, anybody who's agriculture cannot build. We're going to take away your residential zoning. So they downzoned us to agriculture. And so that was in about 1993. So 20-ish years later, I get a call from the county in 2022 asking if we have an interest in housing on our property. And I said, well, yes, in fact, we bought the property when it was zoned for housing, and that's always been sort of the end goal. And that was the beginning of this housing element update process. We interviewed 4 or 5 different potential partners for development and chose Presidio Capital, which is John Blair and Andy Fuller, both local guys. We really could relate to them, had a lot in common. And so that's sort of where we are now.
Great. So you're turning over to John Blair, right?
Yes, yeah. Handing over to John.
Is he muted?
Oops, you're muted, John, I think.
Can you go to the next slide, Valerie, please? There we go. And to the group, thanks for having us today. We're happy to talk about the project and answer questions. This is essentially the presentation we gave to the Board of Supervisors in the initial meetings and their workshop. So if you attended that, this will look familiar. If not, then certainly it'll be informative. But you asked the basic question, why rezone this site, which is the question. And we've got a few aerial photographs and things we'll show you in a moment. But it is an infill parcel, as Brett mentioned. It's next to the shopping center. It's got residential around it. It's on some of our major arterial roads. And we're walking distance to a variety of things. So it does fit in the scope of what I would call good urban planning. And it meets all the objectives that were identified in the environmental impact report that the county put together for this housing element process. And then the last thing, kind of on a basic, is that housing can actually be realized during this RHNA cycle, and that's the Regional Housing Needs Assessment cycle. Because it has utilities, roads, everything's right there, right around it. So there's nothing in particularly difficult about making this project actually happen. So, if you listen to the housing statistics for our area, we have 1% vacancy in our rental housing pool, and that's essentially no vacancy. So it's very, very difficult for anyone looking to rent an apartment or a home or anything to find a place to live. And I know that's obviously the objective, to bring some housing to our area. So Valerie, do you mind going to the next slide? So the San Marcos property is the property in blue, and it consists of 2 different, it's one project, but they're really sort of 2 projects. And John Polanski, who's on the line, and I'll hand it over to him in a little bit, he can talk about the housing authorities piece. But their piece is is on the west of San Marcos Road. It's the 6 acre or so parcel. And he can talk to you specifically about their project. And then our project, which is more of our project has affordable components as well, but it also has a large market rate portion as well. And so that's where the property sits. And Valerie, do you mind going to the next one? We just talked about some of the things that are nearby. I mean, El Camino School is across the street. We met with Goleta Valley School District this week, talked to them about El Camino and their plans, and just get a better understanding of what they're doing there. But obviously, it's very walkable. It's across the street. You can walk to San Marcos High School out the north end of the property onto the bike path and end up at San Marcos pretty quickly. And go to the next one. I mentioned that we're next to the Vaughn Shopping Center. And we plan to have a pedestrian access walkway from the property into Vaughn so that residents can walk over and, visit the restaurants and shops, or potentially buy groceries if they don't have too many bags or they've got a few people to carry them home. Then Magnolia is right down the street. And again, just a variety of things that are already there that don't need to be built. Go to the next one. And as I mentioned, we're surrounded by major arterial roads with Turnpike, Hollister, Patterson, and the 101 freeway. We also have class 1 and 2 bike paths all around the area. And then, as John will mention, particularly for his project, having access to the MTD 6 and 11 lines are important because those lines can service both, Western Goleta all the way down to Carpinteria. So we have a variety of ways you can get to work or things you want to do without necessarily getting in your car, which is something that we think will be attractive. And if we go to and I'll show a slide in a little bit about some of the changes that we made. But one of the things is we do have a lot of recreation and open space nearby. And maybe not everybody knows, but the San Marcos High School is open in after hours for people to go use their facilities. El Camino School is the same way. And there's a few other open spaces, but these are resources that often aren't thought of. And a lot of the projects that are being proposed, there's lots of parks, and we're going to propose an open space as well. But those are some of the assets that the community has that are already there that don't need to be built. And then one other major thing is that you've probably heard about the Chamber of Commerce, the South Coast Chamber's employer-sponsored housing consortium. And the idea there is to connect development projects with employers in the area to create a way for our local workforce to have access to what we actually build. And there's a balance here, of course, because there are fair housing laws, and we have to make sure we stay within the bounds of that. But to the extent we can work with our local employers, so if they want to, for example, master lease a certain number of units and make it available to their employees, that's something that we're very interested in accomplishing with them. And the chamber is going to function with this program as sort of a clearinghouse for these various employers to perhaps make it a little easier on them to manage the whole process. But the idea being keeping local workforce in these properties that are developed, because that's really where the need is. When you look at the statistics of how many people live out of the area and drive to work every day, I think the county, it was a super high percentage. Was it 40% or something along those lines that actually work for the county but don't live in the county? And that's true with many of our employers. So that's the idea, is to get places for people to, live near where they work so they can, go to their kids' activities after work and, see their friends and not spend a few hours a day in a car, jamming up our roadways. And then Valerie, if you don't mind, go to the next one and then we'll come back to this one because we could talk specifically about the site. But I just wanted to, so when we made our presentation to the county, the board of supervisors, we were encouraged by Supervisor Capps and also by Supervisor Hartman to do two things. One was to consider creating more affordable units. And then the other was to create some open space and connect the various projects in the area. And so we've done that. So if you look at the green area, those will all be public open spaces. And that's new from our initial plan. And our neighbor to the north is known as the Tatum property. If you can see this area up top, sort of a vertical, and that's like an oak grove that's existing. And then in the lower part where you see our project, you can see a parkway that is been designated, and that will be sort of a picnic area. And then where the housing authority site is, we've got a walkway that will go from their property all the way to the shopping center in a nice, open trail kind of system. And that will allow people in the neighborhood to walk safely to Vaughn's and, potentially to San Marcos High School. The other thing is we added 50 more affordable units to the right side of the property, which is will be in the moderate category, which is an area or a category that the county's been interested in. And those will be, so when we talk about affordable housing, and John Polanski can talk about this in a bit, it just has to do with having income restrictions on, what your income can be and rent associated with that. So those are some of the new changes that we've made since our last presentation. And Valerie, if you go up one slide. Yeah. And John, are you there? Polanski?
Yes, I am.
Do you mind? Do you want to talk about your site for a little bit?
Sure.
Okay.
Let me get to let me see if I can break into an office here in the service department. We'll be quieter. Okay. Sorry about that. It took me a while to get my car service appointment, so I couldn't change it. Hi, everyone. John Polanski, Director of Housing Development, Housing Authority of the County of Santa Barbara. I'm here mainly to answer questions, but we're really pleased to be partners with the Hodges family, with Presidio, John and Andy. We pick our partners very carefully. We've been around for 83 years. I've been around 28 of those. And so we really, value our partnerships and are, as I said, really circumspect in the partners. This is really exciting for us because those of you familiar with Positano Apartments, which is actually right across Turnpike from San Marcos, is walking distance from this property. That's 118 units we've had on the ground for over 20 years. Serving over 200 children, mostly families there. And so this, we're looking at 200 units, probably two parcels of 100 units each of the traditional affordable housing, 80% of area median income and below, usually much below that, and a combination of family and senior housing for veterans. We do some housing specifically for people experiencing homelessness. We have some opening up. So we're really, really trying to focus in on the families and the seniors who have kind of languished on our waiting lists for some time. You may know that we're also partnered in the Tatum project that John mentioned during his presentation. And so we're really happy to see the cooperative effort among, various partners who are otherwise not connected. I mean, these are separate projects, but the idea of the coordination and the cooperation, we're really heartened by. We're really pleased in that. And we want to, meet with the community as well, to design the best development that we can. John mentioned things that are really important to us. Many of our folks cannot afford an operating vehicle. We require that the vehicle be operating, not on blocks, that it be fully insured, fully registered, licensed. And so many of our folks really can't afford it. And so being on a good bus route, having the ability to bike to school, to even bike to work, walk safely to shopping is really important to us. So thank you very much for the setup. And again, I'm really here to answer any questions or concerns that people might have.
Thanks, John. And as you can see on the other side of the property, what my partner, Andy Fuller, and I, was on the call with us, we specialize in developing rental apartment communities. And there are things about our communities we think that make them quite livable. They're smaller buildings. You can see they're all kind of turned in different directions. So we have nice view corridors, privacy. They don't look institutional. They fit in. They're sort of garden style, if you will. And it's really our goal is to create something that will feel kind of contemporary, ranchy, and just fit in with the neighborhood. And we feel it's an excellent site. And the idea with this property is that it would remain in the family, the Hodges family, and through management, through our company. So it's a long-term vision, a long-term project. This is not a build and flip type of a deal. We've never sold anything we've built. And one of the reasons we think that's important is it just means that we're going to take a lot of care in how it gets developed and how it's managed, because in the rental business, you're kind of selling every day. You have to have a project that people like living in, that the community likes. Otherwise, you have difficulty keeping it leased up. And so we pride ourselves on having, excellent relations with our tenants and offering a really nice social place to live. And, for people could be people getting their careers started. It could be empty nesters and everything in between. But we have a lot of community spaces. We build co-working centers so people can, that work from home can have a place they can go, in a clubhouse and bring their laptop and, kind of work separately together. Fire pit areas, just it's an alternative, a really nice alternative to owning a home. And as we know, homes now in this area are, I don't even know what the entry price is, probably $2 million to get started, and that's just simply far out of reach. So for many people, and just as John has his clientele that are among our most income challenged, people live here will potentially have excellent jobs, but just may not be able to make that jump to home ownership. And so that's the whole purpose of the community. And yeah, Valerie, do you mind going back to the one that shows the park real quickly? I think that's it.
Oops.
Yeah. One more. There we go. And is that clear to everyone what exactly is sort of the open space? Everybody that's on the call. Particularly in the Tatum area, it's that yeah. So there, and then up above the yeah, there we go. Yeah. And those were initially designed to be part of the communities that were built. Like I said, urging from Supervisor Hartman, she said you need to open those up and connect all these projects. And, we think these are good changes.
So there's a bunch of questions in the chat about different aspects of the plan. I'm trying to pull these. Is the parking is the parking covered? How's the parking organized in that? You know, is it a question about will there be solar panels on the parking? Are those questions you can answer?
Yeah, Andy, do you want to take a shot at that?
Sure, happy to. Yes, the carports will likely have solar parking, as will some of the roofs potentially. But yeah, it'll be outfitted to all of the now current. As a matter of fact, the California standards are even getting more stringent. So the level of solar capture will be very high on the project.
And the same is true for the affordable side. We put solar on everything. And in fact, the tax credit program that we utilize requires that we get to net zero or very close to net zero with the solar. So it's very much the same.
I'm trying to, I'm having trouble reading my particular.
I can see, I can see
Okay.
some of these. So
Okay, why don't you tackle those questions that you can see, okay?
yeah, the how many acres? And I believe, Brett, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're round numbers like 6 acres for housing authority and 27 acres for the other side.
Right, right.
So that's a ballpark there. Are the homes units in the housing authority parcel 1 or 2 stories? Those are likely going to be 3 stories. Both projects will be 3-story facilities, and but we will not have 4 stories, which has been some of their projects have gone that way, but we feel like
Big
stories,
fucking.
yeah, can fit into the landscape a little bit better. Will San Simeon Road go all the way through to Turnpike? That's our understanding. We think it eventually will. If you look on the county's designation for that area, it does show San Simeon, and we're talking about the portion in between the Tatum property and our property. That there you go. It does show that as 2-lane. And then the only part that is a little complicated is there's a parcel to the east. There you go. And that area, it would require some eminent domain or some dedication there to connect the road all the way to Turnpike. But, and Andy, you might know a little bit more about this than me, but I believe that is on their plan if we look at what the county's long-term goals are, right?
That is correct. Eventually, it is fully expected to go through.
There are several questions that are pretty detailed about, I guess, the physical characteristics or view shed and so forth. Can you see those? Maybe you can quickly.
Yeah. We don't have a specific rendering showing views from Hollister.
As there won't be any.
Pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody spoke up. I couldn't hear what they said. Can the eucalyptus trees be saved along San Simeon? Those are all questions that will probably be handled when the projects go through the county processing. There's landscape plans, existing landscape, et cetera, that those are really kind of a joint thing that gets decided between the county and the housing authority.
So maybe we could summarize that the neighbor, some of the questions are coming from people who are living neighborly to this proposed project. So maybe the basic question is, when do they get to raise those questions publicly, and is there a process where their voices can be heard?
Yeah, yes. And so this is just the first step in the process, which is rezoning the properties. And, there are 4,500 units across the South Coast County that are going to get rezoned in order to meet the state's housing requirements. Once they're rezoned, then it is up to each parcel in each development project to go through the full county process of review and to ultimately work towards getting a building permit. And that process takes some time, and there is opportunity for input. Certainly there'll be plenty of noticing. So I guess I would just want everybody to know that this is just the first step of a very involved, long process. It's not like it happens overnight. I mean, Andy, you're an expert on processing, but if you kind of look at typical county, how it might.
Hi, um, if I wanted to place an order for multiple pizzas for tomorrow, could I wait in the line? Okay.
Who's that?
Somebody was ordering lunch, I think.
Somebody was getting some lunch. Sounds good. Pizza. Anyway, maybe you could talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, John, you're correct in that this is just the rezoning, and then we will be back and we will commence an involved process of review, and the neighbors and any other interested parties will have several opportunities to participate in that process. It's expected it'll take place over the next year and a half to 2 years.
Mhm.
So there will be plenty of opportunity ahead of us to review and comment.
So one of our big concerns is the affordability, and as I understand it, now there are 250 units of what you're calling affordability. You want to say a little more, John, and both Johns, about what are the levels of affordability that those will look like?
Yeah, we tried to make it easy for you, Dick. Only people named John.
Can speak, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, on the 200, housing authority is our traditional, our niche affordability, which is again theoretically 80% of area median income and below. Although our typical household is at 60% of area median income and lower than that. We have a lot of workers though too, just as they're talking about in the moderate, but just people that are at or near the minimum wage. So that would be, and we put 55-year minimum covenants on our affordability because of the tax credit program. So that affordability is locked in for quite a long period of time. Again, it's all the housing authority does. So we've never removed the affordability covenants in our 83 years. And just really quickly on community meetings, in addition to the public meetings that are part of the entitlement process, the housing authority has a tradition. If a community would like to meet, that we will set up just a very focused community meeting. Maybe in this case, Positano. We have a nice community center over there, and it's walking distance. Anyway, just a thought.
So the addition of 50 units, is that going to be also administered by the housing authority, or is that a separate arrangement as you're conceiving it?
Yeah, that'll be part of the San Marcos ranch on the right side, the larger project, and that'll be managed by us. So it'll not be housing authority, and it'll be moderate, which is up to 120% category. So fits a little different slot. I might also add our project, based on the way we look at rents today, will not exceed the county's rent affordability table at their upper moderate numbers, which is 200% of median. So we feel like this location and this project will be very suitable for local workforce, and it's not going to be priced like a West Beach or someplace that the idea is that it's a local feeling residential project. It's not going to try to be something that it isn't.
Well, I'd like to call on Linda because she has some pretty specific issues and concerns and slides even to raise, and she really wants to engage you on those in that way.
Actually, I'd love, well, first of all, I should just double check when Dick mentioned me earlier. He said I was with the League of Women Voters, and for this year, and especially this topic, anything related to county upzones, I am just speaking for myself as a co-founder of a nonprofit, Future Housing Communities, and as a neighbor who lives basically at the intersection of San Marcos and Hollister.
Okay.
But I wanted to actually follow up on what was just said, because it sounds like maybe the slide that was shown that summarized the letters of intent on April 1st were wrong, because it had, for Tatum and San Marcos Ranch, it said that the above moderate category would be all over 200,000% AMI. Did I just hear that's the top and not the bottom?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the letter of intent said. In the letter of intent, we've essentially added 50 affordable units.
Right.
And then in just looking at the county's affordability table, when we assess where our market rates are going to be, we look at those market rates today, all things being equal, and we feel like we'll be under that ceiling that they have at 200%. But that doesn't, just to clarify, that does not qualify as affordable housing under the housing urban development, standards. So I'd say it's a goal for the county to have rents that can fall within those categories, but they're not affordable with a capital A, as John, deals with at the Housing Authority, and what other 50 would have.
Well, for the Green numbers, I mean, we're just looking at the 4 different income levels. So the above moderate, which really ends up being market rate, we always think of it as above 120%, because that's the upper level for moderate. But in the slide that was shown, it had most of the upzone sites saying that they were going to have quite a few units at the above 200% AMI. And in a few cases, there'd be a few units between the 120 and the 200. So that would be a huge concern, because that just makes the income gap that much worse, where you've got the 20% of low income potential, and then everybody else is over 200% AMI. So
yeah, I can't speak to the other projects, but
and I sent a letter to the planning director about that, just to clarify that that was really the case, and I didn't hear back. So anyway, I'll keep, but it sounds like for San Marcos, that is not the case. You are looking at the possibility of accommodating even the above 120%.
To 200, correct.
In some of those, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, if I could share my screen, let me do that quickly. I've got my, no, I don't have the right thing up. Hang on. And I do really appreciate all of you coming, and no matter what I say that may sound critical here and there, I'm really happy that you are all local and you come with very good references, and that is very important. Okay.
While Linda's doing that, I'll
Sorry.
apologize once again for having to take this from a service department.
And
Thank
I
you.
do want to actually show a slide of Tatum. I don't know if John's going to be able to see it, but because there's a big difference between the old plan and the new plan, and I think we really need to kind of pay attention to that. Okay, I need to just focus on what I'm doing here. Sorry.
while you're doing that, just to be clear, the apartments are all, they're all either 1 or 2 bedroom, right? What's the typical family size that might be able to be living there?
John's mix is different than ours. John, you want to?
Sure. Yeah, it's going to be mostly ones and twos. Our waiting list is highest in twos, and then it goes ones and threes. So that will be our mix. We'll probably have a few threes for a little bit larger families, but it'll be mostly ones and twos.
And we'll be ones and twos at San Marcos Ranch.
So there will be some possible room for children,
Yeah.
obviously, and that the school availability then is a valuable part of this. Okay, there's the screen.
Yeah, Dick, what I mentioned is, Positano, 118 units. And at last count, we had about 230 children under the age of 18, many of whom walked to San Marcos across the street.
Right. Great.
Okay, so I've got a quick update of slides that I presented at SBCAN. I think it was October, and there aren't too many. It's kind of a similar issue, but one thing that's changed, Tatum used to be purple. It was a pending project, and it still is, but now it looks like it may be going through as an upzone. At least the Planning Commission has said that they would add it to their upzone list. So that gave us another more than 200 units. So it's now 545. And San Marcos Growers, that 1455. So that's a little bit less than what I think we had in October. But that is taking McCloskey out of the picture because that was not on the list of recommended upzones from the Planning Commission.
And Linda, if I can interrupt, San
Yeah.
Marcos isn't 1455. It's
San Marcos plus Montessori,
Oh, okay.
sorry, the area. And then if we add Tatum to that, then we get to exactly 2,000, which seems a little odd. But anyway, and then
Actually, just real quick point. The Montessori site was downzoned to a little lower density. So I think they're closer to, it was at 350. I can look up while we're chatting, but just so you know that when the Planning Commission recommended it, they did take a portion of that property and take it down to DR 12, so 12 units per acre.
And then they've got a park piece also. So their footprint for the multifamily has been reduced significantly.
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, look at that on the, because I was using their letter of intent, and you're right, that would have come out before the Planning Commission decision. So that'll probably knock off another 100 or so, I'm thinking.
At least.
And then South Patterson, that was by far the biggest before. It's still about the same number of total if you include Georgie. If you leave Georgie out, it would only be 1458. And that seems to be probably the biggest area of contention going into the Board of Supervisors. Georgie was recommended not to get an upzone by the Planning Commission, but it is a builder's remedy, so I would think they're going to end up doing something regardless. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of an overview, and that is not all of the upzones, that's just the ones, the larger ones, and then it doesn't include the Carpinteria area or a few smaller ones in between. All right, and this is another chart. Sorry that it's got so much to it, but this is, when we looked at this before, we were looking at maybe an even lower amount of moderate units, like 1 or 2 or 3%, because of the impact of the builder's remedy. Because the builder's remedy says you can build with 20% low income, and then 80% can be your market rate or above moderate. So now we've got a little bit more moderate, and this is specifically for that San Marcos area. It does include MTD because that's right across the 101 close to Turnpike. And if you include McCloskey, then we're looking at 8% moderate, but only 15% low, because we've moved some, I believe, of the low income from Montessori into the moderate category. All right, and then keeping that in mind, that we're looking at kind of a 15% low and maybe 7% moderate in this particular area of San Marcos. This is the slide that I showed in October, so it's 100% broken down. And the only thing to kind of start with is that for RENA mandates, they are looking for 44% low income, 26% moderate, and 29% above moderate. Then when we got down to Turnpike, at that point, it looked like we might only get 1% moderate, but 17% low income. And again, this was based on 100%, not the total number of units. So I've updated that to show the total number of units. So the state mandates, of course, are the same. So the state was looking for 42 RENA units for this particular cycle. This is for the South County only. And then if you add the 15% buffer, that gets us up to the 4,500. Because of the impact of needing to build a lot of more expensive units in order to afford the affordable units, and because that is allowed by builder's remedy and so on, we end up with a lot more units in order to get what we need for the low and the moderate income. So, and this was not updated. I think this was done maybe the third week in March. I think it's been reduced a bit in terms of the total number of units that we might end up with. But, and now, as I said, the San Marcos is a little bit less in low and a little bit more in moderate, but you can see it's still a lot less than what we need, which is that what I call the new missing middle, which is really kind of overlaps with the low income. So it's your low and moderate workforce, the people that do not need supportive services, because those are the ones that typically get the low income housing tax credit funding and the ones that the housing authority deals with. So that's a little bit of a background overview. We're looking at livability for existing neighbors as well as new, as well as affordability. And one thing I definitely want to talk about with Jonathan perhaps is who will be living in these new units, especially in the larger parcel of San Marcos. And before I take the screen off, these are just a few shots of that particular intersection. And, you know, we knew we weren't going to have, at least I knew we weren't going to have great views like that forever. And what's interesting, the bottom right, that is the street that has the housing development on the left. So it shows that if you have a lot of oak trees surrounding, then that's not bad either. Okay, and then just one other quick thing. This is what we're getting with the new Tatum plan. So it's a concern. If you look at the very top is very close to the 101. So before you did have a bit of a buffer with more open space. And now you're just, looks like right on the boundary line with buildings and kind of a reduction of open space as well, even though we're now going to get a little bit more from the San Marcos parcel. So that is a concern. And generally, if we want to have a little bit, my view of a theme for all of the South County that's outside of the city of Santa Barbara is that we're not going to have the beautiful buildings to the extent that they have there. And all we can do is plant a lot of trees and cover things up. So I'm all for having more open space for that reason. Okay. And oh, and one other thing before I take the slides off. So the Fuller Apartment Homes, which I believe is a partner with Presidio Capital working on this project, they have developments primarily in San Luis Obispo and Kern County, Bakersfield area. This is one that they have in Santa Barbara. And it shows what I would like to see if it's going to be an above moderate development, the larger parcel with almost 800 units, small rentals. I'm really hoping they could do something that looks a little more like this, but also this development has underground parking and elevators. So that's just a little wish list for me, and I know that's probably not going to happen, but it does add to who will move to the San Marcos area if the rents are similar. Right now, I think the rents are less here than they are at, say, Hollister Village. And there's some availability. So all things that I would like to think about. And I will
So let's
stop.
see if we can now focus that. So is that your basic question? Is who is the market rate housing, which we've learned is under the 200% median level, whatever, 200% income level. Who do you expect the market to be? What kinds of folks? Is that the question?
Well, there are two questions or two issues. One is that we need a lot of housing for current renters because almost none of them have housing security the way things are set up. So that's one issue. And where families can live, for example, is another huge issue. So it's who needs the housing and who will be able to live in those units in the future. I know that right now they would be able to get high rents because there are so many students looking and sharing. They can put 4 students in a nice 2-bedroom apartment. But eventually, say 5 to 10 years from now, there will be a lot more competition. So at that point, who will benefit from that particular type of unit?
And I would add as a context, given that the outcomes of all, that's part of what we wanted, why we wanted to hear from this particular project as a case study that more general, that's the kind of point your charts were making, that we're not really achieving with the existing project plans anything close to what the RENA percentages income-wise were supposed to be. So given that, that adds to just the policy concern is who's going to really live in these places? And so that's the challenge or question that the two Johns might be able to shed some light on.
Well, I can
go
start
ahead, John.
just really quickly on the affordable side. We actually have, as you know, we have waiting lists. That's how people start the process. But we have preference points, and we've had a long time preference for people already living and or working within the county of Santa Barbara. We have additional preferences for veterans, for people experiencing homelessness when we do permanent supportive housing. But anybody in the world can get on our waiting list, but they will not get the Santa Barbara County preference points. So because people tend to relocate where they're working or where their supports are, their schools are, our housing serves the local population simply by using that preference point. John, sorry to have jumped in.
Yeah, no, that's great. Our goal would be to have local workforce or just, local community members live there. It's the best for us because they're not moving in and out. They, support the community. They'll be great tenants. And that's why with the Chambers Consortium, we've been supportive of that, one of their kind of charter members. And we think it's just, we have to have relationships with the local employers so that they know when units are coming up, and I'd say encourage them to master lease units as well. So if you're, just by way of an example, not haven't had this conversation, but let's just say Cottage Hospital says, hey, we'd love to have 20 units reserved for some of our employers. We're happy to do that, to work in a way where we could create a master lease and then they could have some flexibility. Because I think it really works well for all parties. I know the students is a concern. We think we're probably far enough away that it's not as big of a concern for us, but I know the project that was built out at Stork and Hollister or in that area, they have quite a few students there. And, so I know the concerns about UCSB not developing enough housing, that's a real thing because those students migrate to nearby rentals and, then are competing with people that are working for our companies or, counties or whatever it might be. So anything we can do to encourage local tenancies is good business for us, and we would very much like to see that happen.
Okay, well, so the chamber, this seems like an innovative direction. What's it called? Chamber of Commerce Housing Consortium, is that what we're calling it?
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
And the idea of the master lease is very appealing, but here's my downside of it. I've been hearing for years and years this idea of employer-sponsored housing being really in the interest of everybody, and yet almost nothing like that has happened. Even UCSB, which made a major commitment, as we said, hasn't come to pass in actuality yet. So I'm worried that if we put all the weight on that process, or how do we make that? What would be the steps that would make it really likely that major employers would start that master leasing kind of practice with, say, your project? What do you think is needed in terms of policy, government action, anything?
I think if the chamber is successful in attracting the employers, then they would work towards making those commitments between the property owners and the employers, and they would sort of manage it. And their idea is to come up with a separate entity to do that, almost like a small company to do that. Before that got going, we were talking about just reaching out directly to employers and saying, hey, let's talk about how we might be able to help each other. So it's probably a combination. Local preference, to the extent you can make it happen, is really what we're kind of talking about here. But it's how do you navigate that with our housing laws? And it's a challenge. But you need buy-in from the employers. I think if they're not willing to kind of engage in some way to say, yeah, let's make this happen, then it gets to be a little bit harder. Like I said, we have, from a rental standpoint, there'd be no reason for us to not want to have those local workforce tenants. It's all good news for us. So we will try anything and everything to, be in front of those people. But we really need the employers to kind of step up.
So what would be what would be the points of possible resistance by employers to join in on this?
I think if they just don't want to get involved from, let's say, a human resources perspective, it's just one more thing to manage. Having run companies in the past, it just like, well, do we want to be involved in people's housing? And I think you've seen some initiative like Cottage did their deal up at the old St. Francis, and
yeah, but that's it.
Yeah, that's it. And but it's been very successful for them.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that's why we have some hope that this chamber consortium could actually work, because it's kind of taking it out of their hands and saying, hey, we'll do this for you. We just need your commitment, and we need the commitment of the, property owner side. So that's why we like this chamber approach, because I think it's just one more thing to manage for a company, and maybe that's just not waters they want to wade into.
And is that chamber approach part of why you think you can keep the rents at the level that you were saying, which is sort of high, Is it sort of higher end employee housing rental level? Well, I don't know what the technical term would, above moderate.
Yeah, we just looked at where the market is today, our experience with our downtown property, and we looked at the affordability tables at the
Yeah.
with the 200%, and we just looked at it and said, okay, if we built the product we're expecting to build, would we fit into this category? And we felt like we would, and so that's the goal. We don't feel this location is appropriate for like super high end people from LA want to come up and rent it for the weekend. It just doesn't feel that way for us. So we're trying to create something here that'll be really nice, and I'll just say local kind of in feel. And that, you know, there's a limit as to how much you can charge rent wise for that.
Go ahead, Linda.
Well, I think the problem is that, again, we're not really accommodating the low and moderate income workforce. And we are talking about a third, at least, of the RENA numbers. We need to there's just a huge deficit there. The reason that I co-founded the nonprofit is that I was in situations where I was starting to see how bad it was for renters, because I had been in kind of a homeowner bubble, and the community has been through hell with mudslides and fires and COVID and everything, but it's been so much worse for renters. So those are our essential workers, and it's well documented that a lot of the workforce are living outside of the county now, and that's continuing to get worse. So I'm losing a lot of friends, and I was carrying these stories around in my head. I decided to write them all down. In December, I made a list of everybody that I knew had to leave the area or had devastating consequences from being evicted or whatever. And it was 80 households at that point. It's probably about 100 now. And then I took every single individual situation, and I thought, okay, now who in that group would have benefited from the units that are going to be produced across the street? And there were a couple of like older people that I think would do very well in what John Polanski is going to provide them, but none of the low and moderate income people, which is most of who I'm talking about, would be able to do that. I mean, you're not going to have anything appropriate for somebody from like 50 or 60% AMI up to that 160% AMI. So we've got to figure that out. It's not the large employers. I talked to Jonathan a little bit about this, and there are others who are thinking about how can we do this for small businesses and nonprofits. And we're going to actually have some of the future residents perhaps participating. Some of them can throw in some money and have some fundraising as well. So I don't know what it will look like, but I'm hoping there will be something going forward, because it's just getting worse. And I don't want to live in an area that's just a whole bunch of older white people. And homeless.
Yeah.
We're doing very well right now with homeless housing.
And if I may, Linda,
Yes.
If we look at where we are today in the county and what these projects, our projects in particular, are proposing, this is a major leap forward in terms of affordability. I mean, we're at 2.5 times approximately what would be required by the county today had a zoning been in place. So the county numbers today are for far less on the books today, for far less inclusionary housing requirements than these projects are proposing by a multiple. So I think we're making a major step forward in terms of the whole psyche of this whole process. So I think there's a lot to celebrate here also in terms of everyone's willingness to do what they can to get closer to the desired numbers.
Andrew, I think the issue is that the low income housing that the housing authorities are going to be involved with really are only for people that need supportive services. That's where you get your funding. So yes, it's going to be great for those populations, but it really is not going to address the low and moderate workforce.
Well, maybe one important way to look at this is the missing middle is not being met by any public policies, state or national or local, to provide them with the support for the rental prices that they have to pay, the Section 8 type program. And some people advocate just making that much more available, Section 8 type subsidies for many more people. Jonathan, you should, maybe you have something you want to contribute, because this was all your idea.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say we need the housing. I don't think we can overprescribe who's gonna live where, but I think they have good intentions and what we want to get done. The affordable housing that's a part of this wouldn't happen otherwise, and so it would just be an empty plot of land. I think the business isn't gonna continue, from what I understand. So this is going to be a net on affordable housing that wouldn't happen otherwise. The money has to come somewhere, the land has to come from somewhere. I think they're putting the best foot forward, so that's why I support it. Yeah, and I've looked at rents in the area. I live in Isla Vista. I represent a city college district that goes out a little bit into these neighborhoods up until Walnut, so just a little bit away. The rents in this area for old housing is like $5,000 a month. So the prices are already there because we haven't built supply. And so I think there is a supply and demand issue here. And then there is going to be capital A affordable housing. I think, and it addresses so many different things in terms of smart growth of infill and walkability. That's why I support it.
Just really quickly, I really appreciate Jonathan and Linda and the opportunity to speak to the SBCAN group. Anytime I'm able to, I try to join the meetings. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The capital A affordable units would not be happening and without the overall project, which is why we're really excited about the partnerships that we've been forming the last few years.
Okay, so John,
workforce oriented. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, no, I'm glad you raised that, because I was hoping you would say how many other projects are in the works that you have or likely to have partnerships with.
Right now we have 5 projects with various partners, 3 with the same partners, including one in the city of Goleta that we're applying for tax credits next week. We have 3 are under construction in various parts of the county, and we have 6 more early in the pipeline.
Well, that sounds like that makes you happy, right?
It makes me very happy. Dick, I started 28 years ago. And I swear people would lock the doors and put down the blinds when they saw me coming, because they knew I wanted to talk about affordable housing. And now it's completely the reverse. And the partnerships we've been able to form with some really great, property owners, some really great market rate developers have just expanded our ability to provide the housing we need. And to respond just really quickly to, I know Linda's concern, we have been really focused the last few years on permanent supportive housing, because that really was, the need, people who are unhoused, the encampments, the fire situations and things. But we've always housed a great number of the workforce. Most of the families who are able to work in our capital A affordable housing do work. Again, it's just, they're in the very low-paying jobs, the janitors, the waiters and waitresses in the restaurants, the bus staff, those folks. So we do house a number of the workforce that the county depends on. So
if you could summarize all of these projects, what is the typical percent of affordable as you provide it in the total project in each of these projects? Is it more than 20% or is that the target?
Well, 20% is kind of our sweet spot minimum, but we're anywhere from 20 to 26%. You know, it varies in that 20 to 26% range. Now, there are a few projects that are like Hollister Lofts on Hollister that are all housing authority. And there'll be 35 units, all housing authority. But the ones on larger parcels where we're partnered, it's 20 to 26% of the projects that we have on our pipeline.
So the Santa Barbara Foundation has advocated a countywide bond issue to support affordable housing. If that something on that scale were to happen, would that enable a larger percentage of affordable units in these kind of partnerships? How would that help you?
And that would help very much, and twofold. I mean, one is our partnerships, we understand. I came from the private sector side more than 28 years ago. So I know how important it is to be able to do the number of the non-capital A affordable units. What it would enable us to do would be to say, go out on county-owned sites, Caltrans-owned sites, other sites, and build, an all affordable project. I'd say, an acre or two here and there. We'd be able to do, well, like Positano is a good example. I mean, that was 24, 25 years ago, but it's a parcel of land we were able to acquire, and it's 118 all affordable units. That was just a housing authority alone project.
All right, well, we have reached the time limit that we always like to adhere to, and I'm really grateful to you guys, the two Johns, Andrew, the other folks involved with this project. From our point of view, because we're not neighbors, most of us, it's a case study of the larger process that we're going to be going through for the next decade in terms of, now projects that are actually being put forward. How do we maximize the community benefit? How can we make these projects really serve the actual needs that are there? These are the questions that folks like us are going to continue to want to figure out and press. But we really appreciate this effort, and thank you to Jonathan for proposing the project, the thing. And take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
inviting us.
We appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.